Okay, so, I made a mistake. I downloaded a copy of what I thought was Titanic and the Legend Continues. It's an animated movie of the Titanic. And I did. That's what it said it was, but it actually was not that movie. It was a different Titanic animated movie from about a year later called The Legend of the Titanic. To recap, there are two Titanic foreign animated movies that both suck a lot that came out within a year of each other. One is called The Legend of the Titanic, one is called Titanic and the Legend Continues. You can't possibly see how I would have confused these. But anyway, I watched them both, and they're both hilariously bad. So I'm going to talk about both of them. So you get a twofer on this one. So let's start with the one that I watched first, which was The Legend of the Titanic. Wow. So this movie, both of these movies' plots are very similar to start with, and they both involve talking animals, and specifically focusing on talking mice. So it gets even more confusing there. And they both pretty much rip off the plot of the James Cameron Titanic of, a love story between the classes. With this first one, the Legend of the Titanic, you have a wealthy, I believe, Brazilian guy, like a Brazilian prince of some sort, I think, who is on board and has a dog that is super intelligent and talks to people occasionally. Who is sort of high class. And then there is I'm trying to remember how this works. But for some reason, he's treated as the lower class one because he's not European or whatever. And then there is the female lead, who I don't remember her name. Sorry. But she is in an arranged marriage with the baddest of bad guys ever. Who is the best character in this movie and absolutely makes it as entertaining as it is. He is like, you take the bad character from the original Titanic movie and then play him up to 11 and then give him an eye patch, basically. He has this one line where he has this henchman who does a lot of his evil bidding. And he's given a task, and he's like, I'm on it, you can count on me, boss. And then his response is, I wouldn't count on you if you were an abacus.
Jeffries, find out who he is.
You can count on me, boss.
I wouldn't count on you if you were an abacus. Just get busy.
And it's just this great burn that's way too good for this movie. But there are constantly things like that. He has an eye patch that makes him look super evil, too. So they really play it up as he is the worst guy ever. He's also a whaling baron who has this massive plot to try and become a whaling monopoly. Which, yeah, this movie's about trying to save the whales, by the way. Movie about the Titanic. So yeah, he is engaged to marry the woman lead of this movie, and she's not having it. She absolutely hates this guy and calls him old and disgusting, and dislikes him fervently, but her father wants her to marry him at first, and then later doesn't, and it's very inconsistent, but whatever. So those are the sort of the human characters we're presented. There are also the non-human characters, which include a number of mice. Some of them are, I believe, Brazilian as well, who are bringing soccer back to Brazil. Did you know that soccer got to Brazil via mice? I didn't. One of which is Super Scottish, who's the head of it, I guess. He's like the head mouse guy. There's the Brazilian dude's dog, and there's a few others out there. Later on, you're introduced to a totally jacked, really naive octopus, who is like super strong and can throw icebergs for miles. There are sharks who are evil and wear prison clothes and have arms, like fists.
Here's our latest caper, boys, so listen up. We are gonna sink the Titanic tonight!
And then there's whales and dolphins, and they can talk. Alright, plot. Plot, the female lead is sad because she's being forced to marry this dude. Or so she thinks. And she goes out on deck and cries into the ocean, and her tears combine with the moonbeams, and then suddenly she can talk to dolphins. So the dolphins fly up to the promenade of the Titanic and talk to her about how evil whaling is. Uh, and that's she just starts talking to all the animals and makes friends with the mice and other such things.
You can wish on a star if you try. Time will say goodbye. Time is slowly fading away. Don't ask me why. What I feel in this moment for you. What I feel. What's her name? For you. The love of my life. The love I've been waiting for.
I don't believe it. I can understand them. My name's Elizabeth.
Very well, Elizabeth. Now I'll explain. You can understand us thanks to a net of magic moonbeams that caught your tears as they fell into the water. We added a little magic of our own, and voila! The spell was cast.
God, this movie was so astoundingly terrible that I was actually laughing through lots of parts of it, like the moonbeam stuff and the abacus joke, and even more that's coming up here. So yeah, they're on the ship and traveling along, and you find out that this bad guy has this plot to sink the Titanic as part of his bid to form this whaling monopoly. So it's actually a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy between the big bad guy, his henchman, who is commanding the sharks for some reason. Somehow they negotiated the sharks to be on their side. So they're working the sharks, and they give the order to the sharks to sink the Titanic so they can do something. The sharks then do not sink the Titanic themselves. They just stop the propeller, the rudder, so they can't steer away from the iceberg. They trick the octopus, the super jacked octopus, into throwing an iceberg at the Titanic.
Gotta hand it to you, kid. You've almost won the bet.
Only almost?
Yes, because only if you throw a seriously huge hunk of ice can I call you the winner and hire you as head of my own elite guard unit. Got it, kid?
Well, if I had your cap, I guess I could give it a try.
All right. You want the cap, you got the cap. But first, you gotta heave that iceberg over there, exactly 118 yards east by northeast. Yeah, that one over there. Go to work, kid. What the... Give me back my cap.
Hey,
I
Chief,
told you
we
you
get
could
the
have it
cap,
after you
please.
threw the bird, not before.
There are more important things right now.
Yeah, right, never mind. Okay, keep the cap, but you don't get the job until you throw the bird.
Well, fair's fair after all. I'll try.
So yeah, the sharks successfully sink the Titanic more or less. Oh wow, yeah, you see how this doesn't make a lot of sense. It's kind of hilariously bad, but yeah, as this is all going on, the octopus tries to redeem itself for the mistake and actually holds the Titanic physically together, and apparently saves everyone. Yeah, at the end of this movie, they pretty much claim that everybody survived the Titanic, and it was all a big misunderstanding.
Hi, people! Thank you, Tentacles! Tentacles is alive! Look down there on the whales! All the others are alive, too!
Yeah. Everybody survives that I can think of. I think the bad guy might have died, but I don't remember where or when. Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that happens. Yeah, I don't even know. It's basically, this movie's amazing and just has so much wrong with it, and it's actually massively offensive to anyone that, to the people that died at the Titanic disaster. The fact that they turned the Titanic disaster into an animated movie that's super, like a kid's movie, with talking animals that talks about how bad whaling is, it's astounding. Like, it's truly worth watching and digging up, just because the animation's really bad, all the quality is bad here. But the dialogue and the story, everything is just so, what the fuck is happening here? That you will almost certainly enjoy this, watching it with some people. So this is 100% a recommend for, like, a bad movie night. That's all I gotta say on that one. So now, to the other one. This also gets confusing. There are multiple cuts of the other movie, Titanic and the Legend Continues. There's one that was the international cut that went to most places, and then there was a different American cut. There is one review that's particularly famous by the Nostalgia Critic that uses the American cut, which apparently is a little harder to find now. I watched the international cut, which I think is a little bit longer, unfortunately. But the music is different. Almost all the music has changed. That's relevant. This is a musical. So this one very similarly starts with, you have a high-class male lead guy, and a lower-class, basically Cinderella story. They just basically rip off a bunch of different Disney things. Like, there are a couple characters that are clearly from 101 Dalmatians. They use 2 Dalmatians. There's scenes that are ripped from things like the plot is ripped partially from Cinderella. There's a lot of that. You'll notice it if you watch the movie. Again, you have the mice that are on board that are, befriend the characters. It's so weird that there are 2 movies that have talking mice. But yeah, you're presented once again with a sort of ragtag group of animals on the Titanic. One of which is particularly notable, which is the person in charge in this one, instead of being a mouse, is a dog, who decides to introduce himself to our mice friends by rapping. It is astounding. In the international cut, it's actually relevant to the plot, where he's talking about something about be cautious or something like that. In the American cut, it doesn't make any sense, and it's called Party Time. Which is the more famous version, which is just horrid. I mean, they're both really bad. I mean, they're rapping in a kid's movie about the Titanic and talking animals, so either way, it's going to be bad.
If it hadn't been for you, I would be now in someone else's digestion.
Well, from now on, try not to strike out on your own without checking with me first. Because, you see, I'm responsible for how the animals behave on this me.
Tell me, do you know? Do you really know? Do you know it, yes or no? Is it yes or is it no? Do you know who I really am? I'm the boss, and I command, I direct the band. Better stop it if you're breathing. Princess here, it's time for pleasing, cause instead of being a hero, you might become a zero. It's no confusion, no illusion. Out on the sea, so amusing. A special trip, so we best get started. Hardy, party, party, hardy. You, yes. All of you will bring the goodies, mini cakes and mini cookies, tasty steaks and hot salamis, juicy cheese from the capital C. You all. Yes. Go directly to first class. You found the best you can pour in a glass. Drinks are topped and on the rocks. Sparkling wine and sweet champagne. Let it flow just like the rain. It would be a whacking party, so come with me. Come on, everybody. You remember it forever. The one on board has had it better. Hurrah for Fritz! Hurrah for Fritz! Hurrah for Fritz! What a bar, super duper, what a party. Hurrah for Fritz! Hurrah for Fritz! Hurrah for Fritz! What a bar, super duper, what a party. Hurrah for Fritz! He's the most loving party. Yeah.
If it hadn't been for you, I would be now in someone else's digestion.
You know there's something you should know, so I'm gonna tell you so. Don't sweat it, forget it, enjoy the show.
Working all day, now it's time to unwind. Kick back, relax, take a load off your mind. I'll be busting the moves and I'll be busting the rhymes. We'll be busting up laughing cause it's party time. Everybody's feeling fine cause it's party time. Party time, party time. Everybody's feeling fine cause it's party time. Party time, party time. Everybody's feeling fine cause it's party time. Party time, party time. Everybody's feeling fine cause it's party time. Party time, everybody's feeling fine cause it's party time. But just leave your troubles at the door, leave your worries behind.
leave the rest up to me. You're gonna like what you find. I'll be busting the moves and I'll be busting the rhymes. We'll be busting up laughing cause it's party time. Party time, it's party time. Everybody's feeling fine cause it's party time. Party time, party time. Everybody's feeling fine cause it's party time. Party time, party time. Everybody's feeling fine cause it's party time. Party time, party time. Everybody's feeling fine cause it's party time. Party time, party time. Everybody's feeling fine cause it's party time. Party time, party time. Everybody's feeling fine cause it's party time. Party time. It's party time.
Yeah, it's not. It's real bad. This one actually, apart from the rapping dog, which is obviously the big standout of this one, there's a few other things that happen. The Cinderella B-plot kind of goes overboard. They really push the romance much harder in this one than in Legend of the Titanic. It's not nearly as entertaining, though, apart from the rapping dog scene, which has no parallel. It really is, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. A dull watch, but not just a dull watch, but a painful watch, in that the animation quality is just trash in this one. It looks just horrible. There are a couple CG shots of the ship, but apart from that, it just all looks just lazily done. And I think that's really the key to this one. All of the voice acting is just perplexingly horrible. Particularly the lead mouse child. All of his lines are mixed up, and they clearly just did one take on everything, so there are some hilarious line flubs and stuff. Oh, man. Yeah, this is another one I believe everyone survives again. It actually does have the Titanic sink. No octopus tries to save it or anything. And there's no whaling conspiracy. It actually just hits an iceberg. As I remember, the animals were not involved with the conspiracy to sink the Titanic in this one. But yeah, both characters, main lead love interest characters, do survive. Their romance is super forced, and really they're the most boring parts of the movie, is when they're in it. Because they're not nearly as interesting as the really poorly acted animals. There's also evil animals on the ship that are the pets of jewel thieves, which is like a sea plot that's going on. There's too much going on in this movie. The jewel thief brothers that are being trained to be better thieves by their evil mother. There's also another plot with the first officer is a total dick. There's another guy who's like a seductor who's trying to seduce the ship's singer. He steals a locket from the female lead and gives it to her, and it gets really confusing. This is a really busy movie that doesn't need to have so many plot lines, and they're all not interesting. So at the end of the movie, they're trying to wrap all these up. There's also a New York police officer who's on the ship undercover for some reason, and he's only in like 2 scenes. It's really, really, really bad. Like, whereas Legend of the Titanic is kind of hilariously bad, also really poor quality, it's actually an entertaining watch. This one is just like, you look at it like, what's going on here? Because it's mechanically much worse, but not quite as entertaining to watch. This is actually the one that is in the bottom 100, though, which I think is actually justified because the animation is worse, and it's mechanically much more incompetent, even though the story isn't quite as overboard. And the voice acting is really bad. So most parts of that of Titanic and the Legend Continues are worse, even though Legend of the Titanic actually has a worse ranking. But I think I've mentioned this a few times. How the IMDb Bottom 100 works is you have to have a quota of votes to qualify. You have to have a theatrical release for your movie, and you have to have at least, I believe, 1,500 votes, and then there are some other secret qualifications for it. And Legend of the Titanic doesn't quite have 1,500 votes yet on IMDb, but right now it has a 1.7, which would put it at, like, number 2 on the IMDb Bottom 100 if it did have enough votes, which is really surprising. Because I actually thought it was better than Titanic and the Legend Continues. Any case, I would actually recommend doing these as a double feature. If you really want to have a bad movie night, and you're not, afraid to go the animation route, these are something. Particularly Legend of the Titanic, but you don't want to miss that rapping dog scene. It's actually for free on YouTube. There's a YouTube copy of of Titanic and The Legend Continues and The Legend of the Titanic are both on YouTube, so you can watch them for free on the internet. Yeah, if you want to do like a long night, I don't think either of these movies are too excessively long, so you could theoretically pull it off. Watch them both. I recommend both of these movies just because they are just so awful. Awful in the way that you are full of awe when you watch them, and that they are just embarrassingly poorly put together and poorly conceived. The Nostalgia Critic reviewed both of these, and they're actually both really entertaining reviews if you don't want to watch both of them, both full movies. They kind of hit the highlights, but I'd actually recommend watching them without that coloring. Like, I hadn't watched those reviews in a number of years when I came across these movies, and it was way more enjoyable that way. Watch these movies. If you like bad movies, you gotta check these out. I'm surprised they're not more often reviewed and recommended because they are astounding. That's the last I gotta say about both of these.